Welcome back to Spotlight. I am Al Grinov, and just a reminder that my guest on the show today is Richard Stallman, founder of the Free Software Movement. Richard, we've got dozens of questions from our viewers, and here's one from a man called Casey and Andre. He put a question to you on our website. What can the Free Software Movement do to convince people to use free software instead of buying heavily marketed proprietary products? Because most people still believe that Windows or Mac, well, it works better than free software.
Well, they don't realize that it's full of malicious features. It's basically an instrument to give someone else power over them, and this power is being abused constantly. So what I do to try to show people why they should move to freedom-respecting free software is I don't talk about practical things, mere convenience. Because, free software in some cases is convenient, in some cases less so. Just as proprietary software in some cases is convenient, in some cases less so. They're not all incompetent. I'm not going to claim that. But they never respect your freedom. And once you have come to understand this, then you'll realize that it's worth making sacrifices to gain control over the things that you live your life with. The same control that your father assumed he would have when he bought something.
Listen, you're an idealist. How can you consider yourself to be free if you have a computer? If you have a computer, you're hooked. If you live in Europe, you're hooked on Russian gas because you're hooked on electricity.
Sorry.
So you're not free. You're not free from the Russians.
You're stretching the word free to include a lot more issues.
You too. You're stretching it too.
I'm using it in a very specific way, meaning freedom is having control over your own life. It doesn't mean you can get anything you want.
If your gas is supplied by the Russians, your life is controlled by the Russians.
Well, actually, no. What it means is Western Europe is to some extent vulnerable to threats from Russia. But after all, it's an interdependent world to some extent. But that doesn't mean an individual person in Western Europe doesn't have freedom.
Are you married?
No, I'm not.
I am, and I don't want to be free.
Well, but again, that's a different issue.
I want to be interdependent, you see?
But that's different. You see, freedom doesn't mean that you have no social relationships. It doesn't mean you're an island. What it means is nobody is controlling you and making you do this and making you not do that. Now, in a free society, people generally have their homes where they own things, and they can do with those things what they want to do. Of course, there are things where you affect others, where you have to respect their rights. But you have a sort of sphere of your own freedom around you, but not if you're using a computer with proprietary software, because there, the developer, the owner of the program, controls everything.
Mr. Stallman, what's your opinion on the GNU Linux-based national operating system funded and co-financed by the government?
Which government?
Well, government bodies.
Any government.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, GNU is the name of the operating system I started in 1983.
Yeah.
It's pronounced GNU. Linux is a kernel. It's one program that we use with the system. That was the one piece that we hadn't developed, and Mr. Torvalds provided one. So GNU/Linux is the combination. It's basically GNU with Linux. So this is a complete operating system. Now, in fact, it's normally not funded by governments, but we're happy to have government help in improving it. So some pieces have been funded by governments.
Nothing wrong about it.
And government agencies must insist on using only free software for the sake of the computing sovereignty of the state. If a state agency uses a non-free program, that means a private entity has control over the state's computing. That must not be.
Okay, commenting on the death of Steve Jobs, you're quoted to say, "I'm not glad he's dead, but I'm glad he's gone." Well, I think the same thing was said about the mayor of Chicago about his
Something similar, yes.
Yes, something similar.
I tried to quote that. I didn't quote it exactly right. I posted an extra correction.
Well, what was wrong with him? You mean the ideology?
Steve Jobs figured out how to build computers that were prisons, jails for the user, and how to make them stylish and chic.
Which makes him a genius. Which does make him a genius.
It made him an evil genius.
Yeah.
He did harm to the world because he convinced people to rush to stores saying, "Put the handcuffs on me, please." And that is extremely harmful. Mm-hmm. That's what we fight against.
So does that mean that like Motorola phone is better than an iPhone?
I'm not sure. I don't think it is.
What kind of phone do you use? You use
I have no mobile phone.
You don't have a mobile phone.
Right, because all mobile phones are surveillance and tracking devices.
What's wrong about you're so
What's wrong about being surveilled all the time?
I'm not spying for anybody, even for Mossad.
Sorry.
I don't care.
I do care because I don't want Big Brother to know all about me or all about you.
Well, Big Brother doesn't have enough money. Big Brother doesn't have enough money to spy on everybody else.
With mobile phones, it's automatic.
He will start spying on you when you start doing something wrong.
No, not whether you do something wrong. That's assuming the government is a good guy. Remember, we're talking about governments of occupation that support the empire and whose purpose is to keep the people in line. They sabotage protests.
I witnessed a couple of governments comprised of good guys, and they never survived more than 6 months.
Well, I don't know. That's not the point. The point is that I reject the assumption that we should want the government to have more power. We're in a state that has too much power right now. That's not the way things should be. The U.S. Senate just passed a law saying that even American citizens should be sent to Guantanamo, given no legal representation. It's an attack on fundamental human rights. So I don't want that government to have any more knowledge of anybody than we can prevent it from having.
Let's go on with questions from the audience.
So that's why I don't have a mobile phone. It's not that my movements are a big secret. It's not that I actually am concerned whether they would know where I'm going. But I'm against any system whereby this state can see where everyone has gone.
Good. Another one from the audience. Wouldn't widespread adoption of open source code programs make the public more vulnerable to hackers who would be able to analyze the code and find its weaknesses?
Well, first of all, I'm not in favor of open source. Open source is the name of a philosophy that rejects my views. Mm-hmm. So I am not in favor of any. I don't talk about open source except to say why I disagree with it. If you want to cross that out and replace free software, then I could answer the question. But then there's another problem with that question. It assumes that hackers are people who are trying to hurt you. Hacking means playful cleverness. And computers are very useful for if you want to be playfully clever, but they're not required. If hacking is
playful cleverness, then governing is competent cleverness.
No. People have misunderstood the word hacker since around 1982. I'm a hacker. I'm proud to say I'm a hacker, which means I practice playful cleverness in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. It generally has nothing to do with computer security. It's a mistake to use the word hacker to mean breaking computer security. I call that cracking, and the people who do it are crackers. Mm-hmm. So the question is, if you use free software, are you more vulnerable to cracking? And the answer is no. Empirically, our software has better quality, and you are not more vulnerable. We found out just a week ago that there was a bug in iTunes, a security hole that Apple knew about for years and only announced a fix a week ago. And in the meantime, they think that this might have been used by governments and others to break into people's computers and take control of them. Well, that's not free software, you know.
Christopher Calderon asks us on Facebook, asks you, what do you think of social networks like Facebook acting so secretive in their finances and very secretive in their privacy policy?
Well, these are two different questions. Social networking is one question, and Facebook is another.
So Facebook isn't social networking.
Well, it's one particular case. Social networking in the abstract, I don't have anything against that. I don't do it because it's not convenient for me. But if it's convenient for you, do it. However, Facebook Facebook is very nasty. You should unfriend Facebook today. You should never touch it, because Facebook does systematic surveillance of people, even non-Facebook users. If you visit a page that shows a like button of Facebook, Facebook knows you visited that page. Well, we're developing something that's going to cause these like buttons not to show up, so that Facebook won't know where you went. But Facebook does other nasty things, like Facebook, if you're a Facebook user, Facebook would use your face in paid advertisements without asking you. So don't, and there are many other bad things about Facebook. Okay. So you shouldn't touch that. But a social networking site can be ethical.
A question from a user nicknamed Bartholomew. He asks, you are known as being very wary of publication of personal data on the internet, but what's your take on the problem of false online identity in order to deceive people, the so-called sock puppets?
I think that's bad, but I don't think anything can be done about it, because the kind of surveillance system that would be necessary to prevent sock puppets would be tyranny.
Thank you.
I'd rather live with sock puppets.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being with us. It was really interesting to talk to you. Thanks. And just a reminder that Richard Stallman was my guest on the show. He's the software freedom activist. And that's it for now from all of us here. If you want to have yourself spotlight, or have someone in mind who you think I should interview next time, just drop me a line at algorithm@rttv.ru, and let's keep the show interactive. Spotlight will be back with more first-hand comments on what's going on in and outside Russia. Until then, stay on RT and take care. Thank you. Thank you.